Wives, menopause doesn't just do a number on your body. It impacts your emotions, your identity, and even your relationship with your husband. Too often it feels like you're all alone, dealing with all of this by yourself. I know, I've been there, but menopause shouldn't suck. You can be empowered to face the challenges head on with education and encouragement. Join me starting October 16th for a 5-week group coaching program to do just that. I want to help you change the narrative. Join me at oneextraordinarymarriage.com/MSS. That's oneextraordinarymarriage.com/MSS. P.S. Husbands, if you know your wife needs this, encourage her to join.
From Naples, Florida, romancing is fun, and scheduling sex has taken the guesswork out of wondering when you're going to get some. I'm Tony DeLorenzo, your co-host, along with my beautiful wife, Elisa. From coast to coast and around the world, thank you for joining us. It's time to talk sex, love, and commitment. Give us a call or text us on the Hug Hotline at 858-876-5663 or send us an email to hugs@oneextraordinarymarriage.com. In today's episode, we're talking about anticipating those storms that will happen at different times in your marriage and life.
There's a quote from Jodi Ann Bickley that says, "When you are in the middle of a storm cloud, it's hard to think outside of it. But the only way out of a storm is to ride through it, and things will be a lot clearer on the other side." We're going to be talking about storms in today's episode, but first we start every One Extraordinary Marriage episode with a hug, and a hug is an opportunity for us to celebrate what the two of you are doing, to celebrate the transformation, to celebrate where you're being intentional and taking action. This hug comes from a post that was in the One Family private Facebook group. That it was accompanied by a picture that said, "We celebrated 20 years of marriage yesterday. It was our first getaway from the kids like this ever."
Wow.
Just opened the 6 Pillars of Intimacy book together last night, but have both been podcast listeners. Me for a few months and hubby for a few years. We've had ups and downs, but are closer than ever. Looking forward to how to make our marriage even more extraordinary.
I love it. I love it in many ways, man. First, get away from the kiddos. That's always a great thing. You picked up and opened the 6 Pillars of Intimacy book. Awesome. And honored and blessed to have both of you listening and part of the One Family.
Absolutely. And as we jump into today's episode, it is Wednesday, October 9th, 2024, and Hurricane Milton is on its way to intersect with the west coast of Florida.
Now, for those of you who don't know, and you may just be popping in, you're like, well, what does that mean for us?
Correct.
Well, Tony and Elisa moved to Southwest Florida August 1st of this year, 2.5 months ago. The years prior to that, we'd been living in San Diego for 21 years. So this is a new sort of normal happening for us, which we don't want to keep happening.
Well, and the fact of the matter is we don't usually timestamp. You wouldn't usually hear a date in any of our episodes, but because we don't know what the next 24 hours are going to be, and because we usually podcast on Thursdays and we don't know what electricity or flooding or anything like that would look like, we actually made the choice to record ahead of that. And so we don't know. This is kind of an interesting thing because typically we record a few days. We record the Thursday before the Tuesday that a podcast episode is released. So we are recording into the future, so to speak, because we don't know what everything's going to look like when this particular episode does get released. And for those of you that have seen the weather over the last few weeks, you know that Florida also had Hurricane Helene, which not only devastated large portions of Florida, but went up into western North Carolina. And we know we have a lot of listeners up in that area, and our hearts go out to you as well.
Yeah, praying for you guys still to this day.
And Milton is headed towards Florida as a Category 5 storm at this point in time. And, it's really interesting because I grew up in the Midwest. We had tornadoes, like you could tell when the leaves changed color and the way the winds was blowing. We had extreme cold. I remember the few years where it was like, a few winters where it was so cold, you could barely be out for more than like 2 minutes because, the wind chill and frostbite and all of that kind of stuff. I remember as a little one in Maryland, the blizzard, I think it was the blizzard of 79, blizzard of 80, like an actual blizzard where things were shut down, like blizzard, right? And then I meet and marry this man from California, and so we spend our time in California, and that's been earthquakes and fires. We've been through both of those multiple times, but the hurricane is a little different, right? With a hurricane, you actually know it's coming, right? You're not going to know the exact.
Well, the fires you do too.
To some extent.
Correct.
To some extent. But typically, like we've been watching, particularly Milton, we've been watching Milton for over a week.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Like when it was just a little thing.
Yeah. And we actually, it was a little thing, and we flew up to Chicagoland to speak at the Extraordinary Marriage Conference at Calvary Church in Naperville, Illinois. Had an amazing time there with 200 plus couples. Fantastic. We're literally getting text messages and other messages from friends and family about what's happening with Milton, because do we come back down? Do we fly down? Do we fly Abby up to us? So yeah, you're right. We have been watching Milton for at least a good week at this point in time.
Yeah, and that's kind of the interesting thing that I'm discovering. Those of you that live in hurricane land, you've known this for a long time. But when a hurricane is coming, you actually have choices. You know that you have time to prepare for the storm. You know that no matter how much you prepare, there are a lot of unknowns that you aren't going to be able to account for, no matter how hard you try.
I just want to say this one caveat real quick, because you all are probably like, why are you guys still in Naples? We are not in an evacuation zone here in Naples where we are. We've been watching the different models and everything. We're about 2.5 hours south of the epicenter. So please do know that we do not take our lives, our daughter's life,
Like this isn't a flippant decision.
Right. Like we're talking to people we know and everything that's going on who've been here through Ian and other big storms. So this isn't like, oh, whatever. If we were in an evacuation zone, we would have been gone. But we're not, and we've been monitoring, just as an FYI, the surge is the big thing. And so we're about 7 miles from the coast. I just want to make sure people understand, like, you don't think that like we're right on the coast and we're going to get hit by like, a 5 to 10 foot surge. That's not where we live. And so we've talked to people in our community who live near us, what has happened, and have made those choices. So I just want to put that out there.
Absolutely. Because, we don't want you all to think that we are taking a Category 5 hurricane very lightly. We are not.
Not at all.
And it's one of those things where in these choices, or in this season, this period of time, the waiting, the preparation, you get to be in this place of making choices. And what I want to say, and even as we're jumping into this episode, what's true of the weather in these types of situations is also true of your marriage. The question is, do you prepare for what you can and really pray through the rest, right? Being in this place, because like Tony said, we've been watching Milton. We had lots of conversations. There was a point in time where I was like, let's just fly Abby up. I did say that. We together came to the decision, because Milton was still small, looking like a Category 2. We're like, we'll go back. Right. And we definitely were not going to leave her in Florida by herself for a hurricane. And, it's so interesting that we spent last weekend, the weekend of the 4th and 5th in Chicago, and we were literally preparing other couples. When you think about the Extraordinary Marriage Conference, when we get invited into a church, we're there to equip couples to face the storms that they're going to have in their marriage. What happens when there are cracks in the emotional intimacy pillar, the sexual intimacy pillar. So we had spent all of this time investing, helping others, because when a storm like this comes, there are going to be a lot of cracks. Houses, buildings, whatnot. And in marriage, what do you do when you get those cracks? What do you do? What are the decisions that you start to make in preparation? And, going through our first hurricane, I realized that there are some very key elements that in the natural, like in the tangible, that we start really thinking about, right? You start thinking about your food, what's going to sustain us for a period of time, what's happening with our shelter, right? What do we need to do for our home? What do we need to move so that, things don't become, in the vernacular here, in hurricane preparedness, they keep referring to all loose items as possible projectiles.
Yes.
I've never heard the word projectile so many times, but everything's a possible projectile when the winds are going to be over 100 miles an hour. You think about, your power sources. What power are we able to secure for what's going to be our basic energy needs for a foreseeable period of time? What are the emergency supplies? What are the little things that just you need to have, whether it's your medicines, whether it's your passports, the driver's license, like all of those and little things like Band-Aids and flashlights and batteries, right? And then information, right? We moved to Florida first weekend we were here. You guys know this. Tropical Storm Debbie welcomed us to Florida. So yes, in case you're counting, it's been one tropical storm, and this is our second hurricane in
2.5 months.
Yeah, it's the thing. But immediately I start reaching out to friends who have been here for a long time. Like, who do we follow? Who gives information, right? Because as a first timer, you make a lot. I can only imagine what people have thought of us in the grocery stores as we're like walking around, literally looking lost, going, what the heck do we need?
Mm-hmm. Here's one blessing, though, and didn't know it when we moved here, but we decided to rent a fully furnished home because with the move across country, we just didn't want to bring everything. And we are truly blessed to be in a home where they have generators, they have lanterns, they have flashlights, they have, we have gas tanks. Anything that we could possibly need in anticipation of the storm or a storm is already here for us. And I think about that for many of you who've been listening to the One Extraordinary Marriage show. Like, I'm not saying the storm's coming in your marriage, and I pray that it doesn't. And yet, we've been anticipating if it does, you have something for you. Just like these homeowners have blessed us in a place where we didn't have to go buy a bunch of things and figure it all out on our own. We're here. We've had to figure out some things, but we truly have been blessed to walk into this place. And I hope you feel that as part of the one family, is that when a storm arises in your life or in your marriage, there are resources here for you. There are tools here for you. So that way you don't have to spin out of control and figure it out all on your own.
Because the figuring it out part, it does lead to some really funny moments. When Tony and I were flying back from Chicago, I sat next to this couple who went through Hurricane Ian. And, one of the things they were telling me is that they spent 9 hours in their closet during the storm. And I'm like, okay, noted. Plus I'm a Midwestern girl. So like tornadoes, you spend time in the closet, that type of thing. So I came home immediately and like stockpiled into the master bedroom. Master bedroom closet, I should say. And Tony and Abby have been having a field day with me for the last couple of days because I've got the water in there. I've got the snacks. I've got the extra flashlights, the extra bag. Like, my closet, you guys, looks like a bunker right now. The only thing I haven't moved in are the blankets and the pillows, and those will be coming tonight. Because you just don't know what you don't know, but you prepare for all of those things. You lean heavily on your friends. You buy the things that you need when you don't have them. Like Tony said, we were so blessed to be in this house, but when you don't know exactly how the storm is going to come, when you don't know when it's going to hit you, when you don't know what you're going to need, will you take the time to be prepared ahead of time? And what do you need? What does your marriage need? I mean, we're talking about a hurricane, but underlying all of this, I hope you hear that we're also talking about what does your marriage need to prepare for the storms that likely will come. Over the life of any marriage, there will be storms. None of us get through a lifetime of marriage without even like little bitty storms. But we want to talk about how to be prepared for the storms in marriage, and we're going to do that after this break.
Are you a professional pillow fighter? Or a 9-to-5 low-cost time travel agent? Or maybe real estate sales on Mars is your profession? It doesn't matter. Whatever it is you do, however complex or intricate, Monday.com can help you organize, orchestrate, and make it more efficient. Monday.com is the one centralized platform for everything work-related. And with Monday.com, work is just easier. Monday.com, for whatever you run. Go to Monday.com to learn more.
This is Kristen Bell.
And Adam Brody.
And we're dating.
In our new show, Nobody Wants This.
Right. We're not really dating.
No, in real life, we're married.
Right. Married to other people, not each other.
Oh, this is complicated.
Right. It's just like our love lives in Nobody Wants This, a show about what happens when a bold and sometimes provocative podcast host finds her unlikely match in a sweet traditional rabbi.
You can watch every episode of Nobody Wants This now, only on Netflix.
We're back. And we're talking about preparing for the storms. And we need the same types of things. I mentioned just a couple minutes ago the things that I realize are necessary to be prepared for a hurricane. And there are equivalents for marriage that we really want to speak into. It's something that's being highlighted to us in this season. Like somebody said when they asked if we were going to evacuate, and we said, no, we're not in the evacuation zone. And like, how you guys doing? And my standard response whenever anything is happening like this is, well, it's going to be great podcast material. And here it is, right? Because, we start to look at, well, what is the food that our marriage needs?
Can I just go over those 5 real quick
Sure.
before you go into each of them? So Elisa shared prior to the break, it's food, it's shelter, emergency supplies, information, and power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what's the food that your marriage takes in? Right? What's going to sustain you for a period of time? Many of you, obviously, you're listening to the podcast. So, and we know for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of you, the podcast is one of your food sources, right? It's the food that you take in to think about your marriage. It's the strategies that you get for your marriage. It's all of that sustenance. But you also look at books. We know, obviously 6 Pillars of Intimacy, but there are a lot of other books and materials that you all share with us when we meet you at conferences, when we see you face to face, when you send us DMs and that type of thing. What is the sustenance that you're pouring into your marriage? Because I will tell you, there's a lot of crap out there. You can find yourself just, binge watching on like reality TV and people getting divorced and people doing this and people talking poorly about their spouses and all of that. And you can be taking that food in, which isn't going to help your marriage. Or you can choose the food that says, hey, let's do marriage well. Right.
That's a word. I don't know if any of you caught it, but what you're putting in may be what you're getting out in your marriage. And you might not be in a storm right now, or maybe you're facing one, but it may be a time right now just to begin to look at what are you taking in. Mm-hmm. One of the things we say a lot and share with people, if you are a married individual, it is probably best that you don't hang around with a bunch of divorced friends. It just probably isn't a good idea. Mm-hmm. Like, they've gone through their life and they've had to make some choices. I'm not condemning them, not saying anything bad about them, but their mindset and where they are is vastly different than where you are as a married individual.
Yep.
And I know that personally because I've been around guys who have had divorces or gone through divorces, and I even had to set up some guardrails about how much time I spent or talked to them because of the different mindset. The food I'm taking in is going to lift up my marriage. It's going to lift up Elisa. It's going to bring
sensitivity?
No.
Sustenance.
Yep, there it is. Thank you. To the marriage, right? Mm-hmm. It's not going to deplete it. It's going to fill it up.
Mm-hmm. Second one is shelter. What is our protection? What are we, surrounded by in this period of time? And, one of the things that's been very interesting over these 2 weeks of hurricanes is watching some of the emergency teams around Florida deploy these flood walls, which are these really interesting interlocking walls. They've put them up around hospitals and whatnot. I've seen them around people's homes. We see we were out for a walk this morning, the hurricane shutters, the plywood, all of those types of things. What protects us in this time? And I think about those things, and very specifically the flood walls. And I think about the fact that our marriages need guardrails. We need those things that protect us in the storm. So those decisions that we've made about, who are we going to talk to? Or are we not going to talk to? Are we going to have, opposite sex friends? What is our social media usage? What are we following on Instagram? Like all of those different types. Those are guardrails that protect and provide the shelter for your marriage, right? That don't let anything in.
Yeah. For me, I think of this one as prayer. This is our shelter. And power too is that we speak belief, but the shelter of our Heavenly Father protecting us, taking care of us, watching over us. That's just when Elisa is talking about that and I see the shelter, I see our Heavenly Father protecting our marriages from the storm. Doesn't mean we won't walk through. Psalm 23, we will walk through the valley of shadow of death, and yet we'll come out on the other side. Mm-hmm. He's still protecting you in the valley and on the mountaintop. Mm-hmm. He is our shelter.
Absolutely. And, that does bring us into that power piece. Obviously, prayer is one form of power, but it's also looking at, where do we get our basic energy needs from? When your marriage is going through a storm, things like sleep, exercise, movement, those are all of those power sources that we have to tap into, because it's so easy when you're under stress and you're under a storm. And I will tell you, as we've been preparing for this hurricane, I'm not sleeping great, you guys. No. Because you hear the wind start and you're like, oh, is this it? Is this one of the outer bands? Or you hear, it starts to rain and you're like, okay, is this just going to be a little sprinkle rain? Is this going to be a really big, and movement. We came home from Chicago and Monday and Tuesday were all about moving stuff out of our garage so we could get the car. Because again, house fully furnished. We brought stuff with us. So we weren't using our garage for our cars. And then all of a sudden it's oh, you know what? This could be really bad. We might want to have the cars in the garage. Okay, well, all the stuff that's in the garage has to come into the house. So doing all that, and we hadn't actually gotten out and just gone for a walk.
Yeah.
Or worked out. And so even this morning, Tony's like, I'm going for a walk. You want to come? I'm like, yeah, let's get out, because we don't know
what the weekend's going to bring.
And we need that power source, just that connection. What are your emergency supplies? Right? The other things that make a bad situation worse. Here they're talking about, making sure you have Band-Aids, making sure you have batteries, making sure you have, non-perishable foods, keeping everything up off of the ground.
Water.
All the water and things like that. And so what are your emergency supplies for your marriage? What are those things that you're like, okay, this is what we use to take care of a situation? It might be, those regular date nights that are your emergency. It might be, your walk.
And when you think about a date night, it's not necessarily like you got to go on a date night because it's an emergency. It's the preventative, right? Mm-hmm. It's the anticipating. So if we can get out on those date nights regularly, whatever that means for you, that prepares us for when the storm comes.
Absolutely.
It's not like we're going out on a date because we're in the storm, which is okay too. Sometimes that may happen, but we're just saying, what are those ways that you are anticipating? So as Elisa was about to say there, the walk and talk, a coffee break, what are the ways that you are supplying your needs in your marriage?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting because, these aren't areas that we generally think about. Like when you're not facing a storm, you don't necessarily think about it, but moving to Florida and realizing preparedness is like a whole different level here, because these storms keep coming. It is one of those things where the parallels to marriage cannot be overstated. Mm-hmm. When you're facing storm after storm, and some of you are right now in your marriage, you're like, oh my gosh, it feels like we've just had Hurricane Helene in our marriage and we're facing whatever the equivalent of a Hurricane Milton is, back-to-back storms. What the heck is going on in our lives? And that's where understanding what these basic needs are: food, shelter, power, water, the emergency supplies. And then the last one is information, right? I will tell you, I have... Everybody in Florida has their favorite meteorologist. It's not the same person. Everybody has their own. It's all good. I'm not making any type of statement about meteorologists. There's so much amazing information out there, and people are looking at all these different models. I've got my dad sending me the meteorologist that he follows from Puerto Rico. But it's leaning.
And others have sent us money.
I've got so many different meteorologists that in my hand, literally on my phone right now. It's fabulous. But it's looking at that information going, who do I trust? And the same is true for you. When you're preparing for a storm, when you're in the storm, who are those information providers that you trust? Who are the coaches and counselors that you have in your corner that you can say, you know what, it's really flipping hard right now. And I'm scared. I can see this big old, when it comes to the hurricane, I can see the big old eye wall. Mm-hmm. I can see the pressures dropping. I can see the outer bands. I can see that this thing looks like it's going to smack the Florida Peninsula upside the head. Like it just wants to come and whoosh. But who am I going to trust to walk me through that from dealing with an actual physical storm? And who are the people that I trust when we're dealing with a marriage storm? Because so often it's easy to wait until you're in the storm to go, oh, crud, we need help. But I'd actually advocate finding those resources. And some of you have done it already, right? You have coaches, you have counselors, you have, again, the podcasts, the books that you listen to and all of that type of stuff. But it's also going, if you don't have that, don't wait until the storm. Don't wait until the storm. Like we did when we first moved down here, first heavy rainfall, Debbie. And that was the storm's name. And I'm reaching out to friends going, please tell me who the meteorologist is that I need to know.
Right.
Where do I get this information? Who do you guys trust? Especially those that have been around. They have lived here in Naples for 17, 18 years. They've been around through a few of these storms. You go to those people that have experience and you bring it all together, because the reality is Hurricane Milton is coming to Florida. We will see you all on the other side of this storm. But more importantly, we want to see each and every one of you get to the other side of the storms in your marriage. This isn't just about a hurricane barreling down towards Florida. It's about our heart, just like we saw with all those couples at Calvary Church in Naperville this past weekend, our heart to see your marriages on the other side of the storm.
Yeah. Marriage it's fun, and the storms will come. And so how are you preparing? And I think Elisa did it so wonderfully, just talking about the food, the shelter, the power, the emergency supplies, and the information. And this week, as you look at your own marriage, maybe you're in the storm and you need to look at each one of these right now. Maybe some of you are like, gosh, we're sort of on the edge. Like we see it. We feel it. We know it's coming. Maybe you need to look at these. Maybe some of you are just like, there's no storm in sight. And yet going over each of these can empower you, can encourage you, can bring you hope in anticipation of the storm. So wherever you may be this week, know that we are lifting you up, that we are praying for you, that we are pressing in, so that when you go through the storm, you're going to come out the other side stronger together. So with that, you guys have yourself a fantastic week. We will keep you updated on how we're doing. And for all of you who don't know, come check us out on Instagram at One Extraordinary Marriage. That's a great place just to see us from the day to day, the week to week, and what's happening here at One Extraordinary Marriage. You guys have yourselves a great one. We'll catch you next week. Love you guys. Thank you for listening to the One Extraordinary Marriage Show. If you love this podcast, please leave a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you are listening. Your review helps others find the show and know that it's the right fit for them and their marriage.